It's exactly 1:30 p.m. So good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Mourad Dakhli. I'm Professor of International Business at the Robertson College of Business at Georgia State University. And on behalf of the Atlanta Global Studies Center, the Center for Urban Language Teaching and Research, the Andrew Young School of Policy Studies, and GSU's Global Studies Program, I'd like to welcome all of you to GSU's Fall 2021 Global Career Series. This series features representatives from globally connected organizations to talk to students and recent graduates about the rewarding opportunities that await them. This event is part of GSU's International Education Week. Today, we are delighted to bring you representatives from the field of international business and commerce. Our panelists are Rhonda Sinkfield, Joshua Kaplan, and Michael Theisen-Jones. I'll go ahead and start with introducing our panelists. Rhonda Sinkfield joined the Foreign Commercial Services in 2013 and has served in Shanghai, Johannesburg, and Washington, D.C. She is currently serving as an international trade specialist in the U.S. Export Assistance Center in Atlanta and is the inaugural chair of the International Trade Administration's Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Council. Rhonda has nearly 20 years of experience in consulting and public policy in the Office of Management and Budget, Deloitte Consulting and Financial Advisory Service, the U.S. Senate Finance Committee, General Dynamics, Western Cape Department of Economic Affairs in South Africa, and many more. Rhonda holds bachelor degrees in political science from Clark Atlanta University and a master's degree in international affairs from Columbia University. Welcome, Rhonda. Our next panelist is Joshua Kaplan. He is the Office Director of the U.S. Commercial Service, Kansas City Field Office. In this role, Joshua leads a team of international trade specialists supporting the business community in Eastern Kansas and Western Missouri in pursuit of sales opportunities around the globe. Joshua is also the lead agency representative responsible for maintaining relationships with key stakeholder organizations at the local, state, and federal levels, executing multiple initiatives and projects for the benefit of local exporting businesses. Outside of his official duties, Joshua serves as a volunteer with KC Scholars and the Kansas City Public Library to support equity of access for education for underprivileged communities. Joshua has a bachelor's degree in business administration from the University of Kansas and a master's degree in international trade policy from George Washington University. Joshua resides in Kansas City, Missouri with his wife and 2 children. Welcome, Joshua. Michael Theisen-Jones is Director of Global Business Development at the Metro Atlanta Chamber. He manages several programs to connect Metro Atlanta businesses to international growth opportunities. He assists foreign companies considering expansion in the U.S. market and supports initiatives that promote inclusive economic development in our region. Michael holds a master's degree in economics and politics from the Freie Universität Berlin and a bachelor's degree in political science and American studies from Universität Potsdam. Prior to joining the Metro Chamber, Michael worked for the in-house consulting unit of the German railroad system, the American Academy in Berlin, and Market Logic Software. He has also been involved in the development of several startups in Germany. He currently serves on the board of the Georgia Council for International Visitors, the Irish Chamber of Atlanta, and the Alliance for Freedom, Restoration, and Justice. Welcome, Michael. All right. So before I turn it over to our panelists to give you a brief introduction of their organization, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. First, this session is being recorded. We ask that you keep your mics muted to reduce the noise during the presentations. There will be about 30 minutes for Q&A after the presentations. Feel free to type your question in the chat at any time. And now, I'll turn it over to our esteemed panelists, and we'll start with Rhonda and Joshua, and then hear from Michael. Rhonda, it's all yours.
Mourad, I'm actually going to start things off. Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can tell. Absolutely. Please go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, wonderful. Let me just share my screen here. And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. Looking forward to the presentation. So just bear with me. Thanks a lot. As was mentioned, my name is Joshua Kaplan. With my colleague Rhonda Sinkfield, we're going to talk to you for just a few minutes about the International Trade Administration and what it's like to work here and how you might get more information. So in today's introduction, again, we're going to talk about a little bit about our organization within the Department of Commerce. And then I'm actually going to pass to my colleague Rhonda, who's going to share some information about one career path that she's taken and what that's like and how to get involved. And then just a bit more information to close things out. So what is the ITA, or the International Trade Administration? It's within the Department of Commerce, and it's one of 13 bureaus. And really the focus of the International Trade Administration is to promote economic growth and security. So you'll see here our mission statement, but really what it boils down to is focusing on increasing trade, both through exports and through investment into the United States. Now, within the International Trade Administration, you'll see there are three business units. Those are called Global Markets, Industry and Analysis, and Enforcement and Compliance. And I'm just going to talk just for a moment about each one, and then I'm actually going to pass it to Rhonda. So the first business unit is called Global Markets, and that's the one that Rhonda and I are a part of. And really, this business unit is focused on promoting exports. We work primarily with small and medium-sized enterprises. We do have a role to play with large businesses, but as is the U.S. economy, it's so important to work with small businesses. It's such an important part of the economy. That's really where we're focused. And something interesting about Global Markets within the federal government is that we not only have offices and personnel opportunities in the DC area, but we actually also have them across the U.S. So I'm talking to you from Kansas City, Missouri. But we have offices in over 100 cities across the U.S. and then in diplomatic missions around the world. So embassies and consulates, I want to say it's over 75 countries. I think Rhonda could probably speak to that a bit more, but really there's really a worldwide opportunity within this business unit, and it's really focused on getting out with the public, meeting businesses, solving their problems, working with foreign governments, et cetera. Now, the next business unit to touch upon is one called Industry and Analysis, and that work is a bit more focused on research and, as the name implies, analysis. So a lot of writing, a lot of briefing officials, a lot of interacting with foreign policymakers, et cetera. Those positions are primarily based in the DC area at our headquarters. And the last branch, and that's actually focused on, we call it more on sort of on the competitiveness side in terms of U.S. industries, and that's called Enforcement and Compliance. And there's really a heavy data analysis component to that piece. Those are also based in the U.S., in the D.C. area. And I should say for all these, pretty much many of the jobs within the International Trade Administration, they have some kind of opportunity or component involving international travel. So that's something that's really exciting, and you can go about it in a lot of different ways, depending upon your interests and your skill sets. So that was just a really high-level introduction to our bureau. And I want to now pass it to Rhonda, who's going to share a bit more information about her role, and then just a few last pieces. So Rhonda, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Josh. So I joined the International Trade Administration as a Foreign Commercial Service Officer. So a simple way to say it is we're commercial diplomats, and we have locations in 75 countries. So we're part of the foreign affairs agencies. Most of you know of State Department as the largest, obviously, but there's also diplomats within the U.S. Department of Agriculture and U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. And obviously here with Commerce, we also have a diplomatic corps. And we are sort of the flip side of the coin from Josh's work in the domestic field. So he talks to companies locally in the US, understands what their growth, their market desires and growth opportunities are. And then once he's worked with them, they send them to the overseas fields, which is where our commercial diplomats are based, along with our local specialists. So we have locally engaged staff who are experts in particular sectors within their countries or regions. And we serve as the on-the-ground support in these markets overseas. This process works. We have an assessment roughly every 2 years. It's not always consistently every 2 years. But it starts with an intake process, which is an online process. So you have to do an application. And if you get past that stage, then you're invited to an oral assessment. And that's a full day event where they test your skills in, consulting, being able to interact within a mission, a U.S. mission. So that's liaising with some of your colleagues from other agencies, advocating for the commercial aspects of certain policy, and as well as how you can represent a company, U.S. company, to whether it's local government or a local business. And once that step is completed, then you would be placed on a rank order registry, which is, it's basically a list of the people who've made it to that stage. And that's where, when they bring in a new class of commercial officers, they draw from that list, and it's ranked based on the score from the assessment. And I'll just give you an idea of how my experience worked. I was on the rank order registry for about a year, I believe. And then they called me up and said, congratulations, you've been assigned to, in my case, Shanghai. And if you will accept the role, then we'll walk you through the process of onboarding. So that's the process. And I skipped the qualifications part, but one difference between the commercial service and I think probably the State Department is there is a requirement for specialized skills. And that can be any skills, any experience you've had. It's 3 years of experience in, it can be international business, it can be international affairs, international trade. There are a broad set of experiences that would qualify for that. So just wanted to give you that we do it with the commercial service. We do have people come in with a bit of experience in the field. And Josh, if you can go to the next slide. So how can you learn more? This is broadly about International Trade Administration. I would say follow us on our social media, as well as check out our website, trade.gov. But we have several accounts within, I looked at LinkedIn this morning to see, but there's the Department of Commerce, there's the International Trade Administration, the U.S. Commercial Service also has an account, but then within U.S. Commercial Service, some of our overseas posts also have individual accounts, and you can follow what's happening if you have a specific interest in, let's say, Sub-Saharan Africa. They have an account, and different offices. We do have limited paid internships. This year was the first year in a while that we did the Pathways internship program. That's a federal government program that is designed to bring people on at the entry level and help them develop a career longer within the U.S. government. So we had, I believe, 5 at the International Trade Administration this year. Those are limited, but I encourage you to stay tuned if you're interested in those. Other internship opportunities are at the local office. So for example, right now I am assigned to the U.S. Export Assistance Center in Atlanta. And typically we do bring on interns. It's a little bit unusual in the current time period because we are 100% virtual, and it's a little bit tricky. So sometimes we bring on people at a project basis, but each office is responsible for bringing in their own interns. So if you are going to be in another city where we have an office, I encourage you to reach out to that particular office to see if they have opportunities in the internship program. And then the VSFS internship is, Josh, help me with that, is the virtual?
It's through the State Department, Virtual Student Federal Service.
Yes, and that is an ongoing, sorry, well, I just say, and then Josh, you can add more. It's an ongoing program that's administered by the Department of State, and any government agency can request interns from that program based on projects. So you would submit a project to this website, and it seeks to match interns with those particular agencies on specific projects. Anything more, Josh, you want to say on the PSFS?
Well, Rhonda, we'll leave it at that, but it's just to say the idea is that students can be anywhere in the world and can get substantive work experience from, remotely from where they are. And that's a longstanding successful program, and our offices do participate in that.
Okay, thank you. And I mentioned pathways already. So Josh, if we can go to the next slide.
Sure.
Oh, and then I already said, connect with us on LinkedIn, but we have our information, Josh and mine as well. So feel free to reach out to us if you have specific questions. We're happy to help. And, as I mentioned, we have I'm in the Atlanta field office. We typically have, opportunities for you to connect with us there, but we're limited in this time period. And thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask Michael to jump in and share something about his organization.
Yeah, thank you so much. I don't have a presentation, but I thought I'd give you a quick overview of what we do at the Metro Atlanta Chamber, and then throughout the questions, we hopefully can answer any additional ones. But so I'm representing the Metro Atlanta Chamber. We are a private nonprofit organization, one very old chamber in the United States. We've been around for 162 years. And we really work on representing the business community, colleges, universities, nonprofits across the 29-county region of Metro Atlanta. Around 26 million people live in Metro Atlanta, and we work with businesses and organizations around the entire region. We do a lot of different things, but to kind of sum it up under 3 categories, this is really where we focus on, is grow, promote, and advocate. So we have a economic development team, of which I'm part of, and an innovation entrepreneurship team that focuses on growing this region, growing jobs in Atlanta, helping companies to grow, helping foreign companies or domestic companies to move to Atlanta. We also have a public policy team focusing primarily on making sure that we remain a top state of doing business here in Georgia. And then we promote Atlanta, both here in the United States, but also abroad. We have a very large brand communications team, and I would encourage you all to check out the initiative Choose ATL. I will drop that link later in the chat. It's a fantastic opportunity to learn about job opportunities around the region from different organizations, but also learning about Metro Atlanta in general. I mean, some of you might be from here, some others moved here. So it's a great website to get to know Atlanta better and learn what's going on here. And then we have the Atlanta Sports Council, also housed in the Metro Atlanta Chamber, and they are focused on recruiting and executing larger sporting events here in Metro Atlanta. And then we also have a diversity, equity, and inclusion team that is part of our brand communications team that works across the organization. But as I mentioned, we do a lot of different things. But since we're talking about the global international work, I'm representing the global commerce team. So we are a subdivision of the economic development team. And everything I do is cross-border, or almost everything I do is cross-border. I work with foreign companies that consider entering the US market, and we're already helping them to set up their office here, helping them to find the right talent, making sure they have all the resources that they need here on the ground. But I'm also working with companies here in Metro Atlanta that want to grow internationally, both through export and sometimes even opening an office abroad. And so we work, we have a lot of different initiatives that we run. We run a very large grant and mentorship program. It's called the Atlanta Metro Export Challenge, or short Atlanta MEC. And that is a program where we support companies financially and with mentorship to grow internationally. And so we do that. Everything we do in our team, we do in collaboration with our partners, for example, the U.S. Commercial Service or the state of Georgia, Small Business Development Center, and many others. And we also work very closely with the private sector as well, both here in Atlanta and also abroad. And we at the same time also work with a lot of the foreign representatives here in Atlanta, including the consulates, the trade offices, some of the honorary consuls, and some of the chambers that are here, and then also working with the embassies in Washington. So when it comes to career opportunities, of course, we are not a large organization, but we are fairly large. We have openings coming up on a regular basis. Right now, I know that we have 3 internships open at the organization. One is in our economic development team. As I mentioned, I'm part of the global commerce team, which is a subdivision of the economic development team. And so that intern would work across our different subdivisions of the economic development team, including global commerce. The others are more industry specific, and then also kind of on the project side, helping companies to grow here. And so that's definitely a fantastic opportunity. If you're interested in that, please let me know. We have the job description on our website. But this is a fantastic opportunity to really get involved in some of our global efforts here in the region as well. We also have an opening in our investor relations team, focusing primarily on events, and then another one in our public policy team, focusing on business climate. So those are all great opportunities at the chamber. So if you're interested in that, let me know. But also feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn if you have any additional questions, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that Mourad and the rest of the team has.
Thank you all for giving us a snapshot of your organization. I'm sure that our guests now see the important role that government and non-government agencies play in the promotion of trade and investment, and in furthering the benefits and the well-being in our regions and across the US. I'm going to start by asking each one of you easy questions, and I know many are interested in your own career trajectories. I did mention where you went to school, but I'd like to ask if you have studied foreign language, and if your career right now has been planned, or did you end up with a different career from what was your originally planned? So Rhonda, why don't you go first?
Sure. I'll start with foreign languages. I did study foreign languages. I started off with Spanish. From high school, actually, and then into early college, and then switched to Japanese midstream in college. And I also did a study abroad in Japan. So that prompted the change in language study. And I did start off in a different career path. I went to college, studied political science with the intention of going to law school and focusing on civil rights law. And I took a course in international trade, and that changed the trajectory of my career. And I started pursuing international affairs. And so I've worked within trade and international affairs and public policy at different aspects. So.
Very nice, very nice. Same question, and I'm going to ask Joshua to follow up on that.
Sure thing, Mourad. So my answer is really maybe kind of unusual in that, yes, I did study foreign language in college, and that kind of what got me interested in the international side. So I studied Spanish, and I actually did an internship right after college with our agency in northern Mexico. After that, I ended up not returning to our agency for some time. But I really continued on a path towards international trade, government, international affairs, not really using Spanish that much, frankly, but that kind of got me some real world experience and got me started on the path that I continue on in this day. So I did sort of have this has all been part of the plan somehow. I didn't know it at the time.
Very good, very good. Michael?
Yeah, I don't want to repeat my whole education, but of course I moved here from Germany, so based on the university, that's probably pretty clear in my accent as well. But I was not 100% sure where I wanted to work when I started college, and I say that because I know a lot of people feel the same way. Back then, I was certainly more stressed about it than I am now, but. I think where I am right now is really kind of a combination of the studies, but also really the internships and the work that I've done throughout college and grad school. I worked through my entire college time and grad school and in lots of different areas that did not necessarily all have to do with my subjects that I studied in school. But I always wanted to really build up a robust skill set and experience. So as you mentioned earlier, I worked a lot in like startups, especially tech startups. And so there was an interesting experience there. And so in my role now, of course, I work with a lot of different organizations, a lot of different industry sectors. so having that experience in some of the sectors that I work with now is actually very helpful in that regard. Languages, I essentially studied language when since my entire undergrad and grad school was in English. But in Germany, we have a very strong focus on language education in high school. So I started learning English in 5th grade and then French in 7th grade. I learned a little bit of Latin, which I can't speak, but it was certainly very helpful in learning some of the other languages. But it was certainly very, very helpful to learn those languages, obviously, because I'm speaking to you now in English, but also just learning kind of the other skills that are really associated with learning a language throughout school. So yeah, where I am right now, I feel like it's really a combination, not just of my studies, it's really the combination of all the different experience I had throughout undergrad and grad school and the people I spent time with. And of course, moving here from Germany had a big impact on that.
Very well, very well. What skills have you learned in your professional life that have been vital to opening career opportunities for you right now? Now, maybe
should I take that, or should we go back?
Why don't you continue with that? Because I know it kind of flows into what you were just saying.
Yeah, I mean, languages was certainly a big important skill, obviously, because I'm speaking English here. So that was definitely very helpful, but it helps in my current role, of course, to be able to speak German, since we work with a lot of German companies that are based here. But I feel like languages certainly open a lot of doors for me, especially with the opportunities to study abroad and going into an undergrad program in English, even though a lot of programs in Germany are in German, obviously. But I think another very important skill is probably the ability to network. And I know that a lot of people bring it up all the time, and you say you're either good or bad in networking. I think I was not as great in networking when I started off in my college. But over time, I just try to really use my network and I go out and meet with people in jobs that I was interested in, or in internships I was interested in. And that certainly helped me a lot, especially after moving here, really getting in touch with people in fields that I was interested in and learning about the opportunities out there. So it's certainly a skill that helped a lot. And then maybe one is just not necessarily a skill, but really kind of the ability really to look beyond my day-to-day work. So right now in every job that I held before, I always wanted to make sure that I learn additional skills, not just the things that are important for the job. So I always was interested in learning some of the skills that in other fields that were related to the job, or where I thought it could maybe help me for my career. So as I mentioned, I've worked in some startups, so I was very interested in kind of the technology side of the business. Even though I was not my subject in college, I was very interested in learning more about it, and that of course helps me now because I work with a lot of technology companies. I hope that was a good answer.
Yeah, very nice, very good. And Joshua and Rhonda, you want to add to that, to share with us what skills you think were the most critical for you, most important?
Okay, thanks, Mourad. Yeah, was it Joshua or Rhonda?
Go ahead, Josh.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Rhonda. And then, yeah, you're welcome to join too. I wanted to point out in our organization, I found really the ability to work on a team cannot be overstated, the importance of that. I mean, we're working with people within our community, so state, local, federal, across the U.S., so on teams with our colleagues all over the U.S. and around the world. I mean, so for example, before COVID, when we were traveling, and I'm sure Rhonda has a lot of these examples too, I worked on a trade mission program for the better part of a year with colleagues in India and Bangladesh, as well as 5 or 6 different cities in the U.S., people from, and nationals of other countries too, all working together, a common goal, but maybe different ways of doing it. Really complicated projects, but the ability to listen and to communicate and to understand that not everyone maybe goes about things in the same way. I don't think that can be understated for any internationally focused work. So I would say teamwork is probably the most important thing that I've seen.
Very good, very good. Rhonda?
And I will just add, particularly in the Foreign Service, I would say develop strong writing skills, so business writing or policy writing, but mainly business writing, because you have to condense a lot of information to leaderships in a very concise way so that they can understand the issue and be able to represent the issue in meetings, but also public speaking. So take opportunities to hone that skill. It's not something that people are comfortable with, but it is an important skill in a number of areas, but particularly when you're overseas representing, the U.S. government or U.S. business. You'll often be called to speak on behalf of any number of topics, sometimes without notice. So that's an important skill to develop as well.
Very well, very well. I see a couple of questions here, and I think some of them relate to some of the pre-prepared questions. One of the questions is, what do you think are the top skills that your organization is looking for? And then also, what steps can students take to develop those skills? And related to that is, do you accept CPT and OPT in your organization? So what skills and how to develop them, and what can they do? I'm going to ask maybe Michael to take a stab at this one first.
Yeah, absolutely. So it really depends, of course, on the department you're applying for, since we have a lot of different departments I mentioned earlier. But I think some general skills that you should have applying for our organization is of course a passion for Atlanta. Since what we do is really to grow and promote Atlanta. Of course, I'm not from Atlanta, I moved here, but a lot of people in our organization are not from Atlanta. And so really having that passion to help the region, help the business community, help the people that live here in Atlanta is certainly very helpful. I think the ability to really work in a fast-paced environment. I know this is something that comes up in a lot of job descriptions, but every day for me looks different. As I mentioned, I work with a lot of different industry sectors, a lot of different partners, internally, externally, public, private. So really being able to work in that environment, and also to be able to collaborate. I think that is a very important skill that we need, because when I manage a project, I work with people in a lot of different departments, but I also work with a lot of external partners, and everyone works differently. And being able to really manage a project or an initiative in collaboration with a lot of different partners, a lot of different opinions it's a very important skill to have. Some of the skills you could probably work on, especially doing college or grad school, is the networking component I mentioned earlier. I can't stress that enough. I think really reaching out to people, as I mentioned, feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn, just talking to people in organizations that you're interested in, kind of getting that network and building up that network, learning about the skills you need for specific jobs, learning how it feels to work in a certain role or in a certain organization will help a lot. Being able to learn some additional skills, maybe. I know that's easier said than done, because school can be very busy, but if you have the opportunity to volunteer or work in a part-time job or intern over the summer and get some additional skills related to your job you're interested in, but also maybe in skills that differentiate you when you're applying for an opportunity. And then I think last but not least, I would say learn to talk about your experience and your resume. I think is very important. I have seen great resumes before, and people are not exactly able to talk exactly what they have done. So I think that is something you can definitely learn, to really learn how to briefly introduce yourself, your passion, your projects you want to work on, and your plans for the future. And you can practice that with friends, of course, but you can also practice that when you apply for jobs. But I think that would be certainly helpful to have.
Very well, very well. And Rhonda and Joshua, in addition to that, also I want to make sure you address the question. I think this is more directed to Joshua and Rhonda about do you accept a CPT, OPT, and then also do you sponsor H-1B visas? And I know a couple of our students are interested in that.
I might mention, Mourad, so to work for the federal government in our organization, at least to be many of the jobs require U.S. citizenship. Mm-hmm. There are some opportunities in foreign countries, as Rhonda alluded to work as called locally engaged staff at an embassy or a consulate, and those are typically nationals of those countries. But to work for example, for my agency for the commercial service, one of the requirements on USA jobs is U.S. citizenship. So that's definitely could be a constraint for maybe some of the participants here. There's no visa component or anything. I might just maybe add, and Michael touched upon a lot of great points, and also pass to Rhonda if she wants to say anything in terms of skills and kind of how you can make yourself stand out, because that is really important. It's a really competitive job market, even for individuals wanting to work in international trade. You're competing against dozens, hundreds of other people. A lot of them have really strong resumes. You definitely, I would say for our organization, one of the components, I don't work quite as much with it, but if you're interested in working in some of our functions that are really data driven, you want to be able to point to projects that you have completed in your schooling, and you can do that. You can actually, you can take a statistics class or an operations management class, a lot of classes that they may offer. Hopefully you have some sort of tangible project at the end that you can refer to if you get to the interview, or even in a cover letter to get to the interview. So you want to have things that are tangible that you can really highlight. That's what I tell our interns in our office. What do you want to get out of this experience that's going to let you sell yourself in an interview? And so there are a lot of ways to apply that, but that certainly is the case for our organization, for students to keep in mind. Rhonda, did you have anything you wanted to add about particular skills?
No, I think between you and Michael, you've covered some really great ones. Being adaptable. Again, I'm going back to my experience in the Foreign Service. You're, placed in a new country, every 2 to 3 years. So being adaptable to a new environment, new situations, things not always going the way you expected or want them to go, but I would just say be adaptable and be curious. I think that is in line with the things that were already said, but what do I need to know? What are some new things that are emerging in a field of interest, or a new field that you are discovering? So just, I always say I didn't have a linear career. I did a lot of different things because I was curious and I wanted to try different things. I just got adept at telling how all of those things related and how they enhance my experience and what I can bring to an organization.
Thank you. By the way, just on a side note, I know I see many Laura Hastings. I know we only have one at GSU, so if you would like to rename your thumbnail there, please go ahead and click on the 3 dots on the top right, and then you can rename yourself there and add your own name. Thank you. I want to follow up on that, and I know many of the students in attendance today are taking a foreign language. Are there any particular languages you think are most needed, and which one are the most useful for the workplace today? I will, with languages, I'm going to start back to Rhonda, maybe.
Sure. Well, I will, I think we're located in 75 countries, as I mentioned, and as part of that, if a language is required, training is provided. So you do go to language school within your career. But I would say what we call the hard languages are always in demand because they require, a lot more engagement. And Mandarin certainly is one that I think there will always be opportunities within our organization, but broadly in that language. Arabic is also a hard language that, and I say hard in that there is a scale that talks about how much time is required for basic language acquisition. I don't know the actual specific requirement, but those languages are considered hard based on that language acquisition timeline. So, those are certainly languages that take a lot more time and investment. And if you have an interest in those, I would say would serve you well in a number of different ways.
Thank you, thank you.
But
Josh,
most important, I say, study what you're interested in, something that you enjoy. It's the bottom line.
Good point. Good point. Joshua or Michael, anything to add on the language component?
I might just to jump in and say that, yeah, if you know a specific part of the world that you want to focus on, especially if, I mean, if you're going to the Foreign Service, there's a training component as Rhonda mentioned, but if you're not, you have to know the language. If you want to be a desk officer for, China, you have to know Mandarin. But I might even kind of extend it out to say that by demonstrating that you're able to learn a language, you're sort of implying to others, suggesting to them that you know about that culture, you've traveled, you can take on a challenge and see tangible results. So there are a lot of elements to it besides just like strictly using the language that lend themselves to being a successful applicant for a given position.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joshua. I think it was a really good point about language is not just about the communication. It's also really that interest in a culture and the history of the country that you speak that language. For my role, I speak primarily of English, and most of the work I do is in English because we cover so many different countries with a small team. So I wouldn't say there's any language that is more helpful than others. I mean, German helps me a lot because we have a lot of German companies. But I feel every language is of benefit because I really, if I think about the last 4 years at the organization, I've worked with companies from so many different countries. Of course, it's always nice if you speak the language or at least have some skills in it. But it would be impossible just time-wise to learn all the languages, which I would love to do, but it's of course a lot of commitment. But I think I would say if you have the opportunity to learn a language at school, any language is helpful in our field. It just shows your interest in really expanding your global mindset and global skills with any kind of with any language.
Very good, very good. Thank you. And I see some of the questions are being answered already in the chat. Thank you. As a follow-up to our discussion of language, let's kind of zoom in and talk about global competence. How important do you think is global competence as a skill in your organization? Why it is, and how do you know that someone actually has it? I will go ahead and maybe ask Joshua to start us on this one.
So, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, sort of to my point before, there are a lot of different ways to demonstrate as being a global professional, including when you're in college. I think in many larger universities or some sort of international group, of course, there's a language study abroad. That's something that can really, it's not going to automatically get you a job, but I would say it's a really easy way to show that you can successfully exist or interact in a foreign market, especially if you're somewhere where you have to be on your own a little bit more and you're living with a host family. I mean, there are different levels of it. So, I don't know if there's one definition of that, but I feel like there are a lot of ways in college where one can sort of bolster their portfolio of global skills. I mean, the classroom component is important. That's not to be understated, but especially as it comes to what you were able to accomplish in those classes in terms of projects, as well as what you did outside of class, I would say that really shows, could help you stand out, further.
Good. Rhonda or Michael, your view on the importance of global competence skills and how do you know someone has them?
Yeah, I can jump in unless you want, Rhonda. Okay. Yeah, I think, I mean, the short answer is yes, it's an important skill to have and to work in our field. It is, of course, sometimes difficult to show that skill just by your resume. I think, as Josh said, some of like language skills, a study abroad is a great way to show someone that you have global competence. But I think that most of the times you kind of recognize that in the conversation, the way you think and the way you put things into context. And as I mentioned before, I mean, we promote and grow Atlanta, or the region here. And of course, our region is very international. And it's not just because of the airport. It's a lot of foreign companies are here. A lot of foreign representatives are here. A lot of people move to Atlanta, and we want to represent that global city, Atlanta, around the world. And so it's very helpful for our employees to have that global competence, really being able to understand larger economic, political trends that influence our region but also really like on a day-to-day basis, the organizations that we work with. I think the supply chain shortage right now is probably, or like the struggles in supply chain is a good example for people that look at the larger components and how they influence a business on the ground that you work with on a day-to-day basis. And so I think you learn a lot about that when you talk to someone for a while. And I think that's why I've always encouraged people to kind of prepare for, like, if you have an interview, for example, kind of being able to talk about that a little bit. But I also think global competence has a lot of other skills really closely associated with it. I feel like just kind of the critical thinking and kind of optimism, innovation, awareness of kind of the larger trends. And I feel like anything you can do to strengthen your global competence, I think is very helpful for any kind of career in our organization or any other global career.
Rhonda, anything to add to that item?
No, I think both Josh and Michael have covered most of the critical components, but it's basically find opportunities to work in the space, whether it's on a volunteer basis, a school project. There are many opportunities, but showing willingness, I think, is the first step.
Very good. Thank you. I know the question about disability, are you all disability friendly, and how do you accommodate persons with disability? I know that Joshua answered on behalf of your organization. Michael, do you want to add anything to that? And it might also be related to interest in your organization.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I don't have the perfect wording for what is in our job description, if you have a section on that, but of course you can apply for an opportunity with us. And you can discuss those with our HR person, or feel free to reach out to me about it. But yeah, absolutely, we are definitely disability friendly. Very
good. I have an interesting question, and I know that Joshua also took a stab at this one. Are most of the opportunities entry level, or are they mid-career level hires, someone who's bringing years of experience from other industry? And I think this is quite interesting for both organizations.
Oh, I see the answer from Joshua right now. Yeah, Rhonda, go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say, actually, echoing what Josh said, it is a mix of entry level and advanced, and particularly, as I mentioned early on in the Foreign Service, they do want people with at least 3 years of specialized experience. But in other places within the organization, some of the maybe trade analyst role, quite a few people come in directly from graduate school. I'm not sure the undergraduate, but I know I worked in an office in Washington, D.C. with quite a few people who had just completed their graduate study. So it's a mix within the organization, depending on where you are looking to join the organization.
Very good, thank you. One question here, Mariam Irfan is curious, is Urdu a language in demand?
So I just want to add that because I didn't list it, it does not mean, there are always opportunities in many different languages. And if you can communicate in a language, that's always a useful skill. So focus on a language that you're interested in, a culture or region or country that you're interested in, because you will do well in that area because of your interests and passion. So, don't get discouraged if it's not on, the class list or the State Department FLAS program of that nature. So I would say focus on what you are passionate and interested in.
Very good.
Maybe I would add, Rhonda, thanks for that. And can I add, Mourad, just to say that, one way to think about it, let's say you happen to, maybe you're a freshman in college and you haven't really focused too much on a language. I think the way that let's say our organization, or probably most federal government organizations, determine which languages are really in demand are those, one, where the need is high to have U.S. personnel engaging in those markets, and two, where there's a shortage of people who speak those languages. So most of our organization, if you look at where the offices have opened overseas, in the past 5 or 10 years, they're mostly in developing countries, and not all of them where they speak English. Developing countries in China and maybe Southern Asia. Those are examples. So yes, Urdu, would be one. I mean, yeah, they don't speak that all over the world, but there's a substantial portion of the population where the economy is growing, where that is their primary language. So that could definitely be an important one. So it's something to think about when you're making your decisions. Well, how's what I'm doing going to match up with what my potential employer might need? I mean, Mandarin is obviously has been most recently, I'd say probably an obvious one, just because China has grown so much. But there are others too that are maybe a bit farther afield that will be equally important, at least for our government, to make sure we have people who can engage in those countries.
Very good, very good.
Yeah,
Michael?
maybe adding to that, again, we don't really have specific requirements for languages in our organization that you have to speak. And I come back to kind of the differentiator for your application.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like any language can be that differentiator. It's not just about being able to communicate in that language, but it's really about your willingness to learn a language, which of course is a big undertaking. It's an important and very difficult skill to learn, and you learn more than just a language. And so that can be that kind of differentiator on your resume to highlight that. So I wouldn't be so much focused on, is that language helpful specifically in my day-to-day operation? As I said, we work with companies in every country, and sometimes I can speak the language and sometimes I can't, and sometimes no one on my team can speak the language. But it might be a situation where you can shine with the language that you learned. So I would certainly always highlight that, because I feel like that is certainly something that we also look at as an additional skill.
Yeah. And I went ahead and shared in the chat here a link to Circle. This is a language acquisition center here at Georgia State for free. And I know for all our minors in international business or master international business, we actually share this with them. We bring someone to talk about it and to make sure they see it from the beginning. So for many of our attendees, this is something that you might want to consider.
Mourad, real quick, I see that question in the chat a couple of times, and I'm sorry I haven't answered yet to it in the chat, but about the sponsorship for visa in our organization.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm not 100% sure whether we sponsor visa internships, but I will certainly make a check that with our HR department.
Thank you. And we can share that with the audience later on. Thank you. I would like to kind of shift the attention now and talk about issues that are very important, of course, today. Maybe starting with Joshua and Rhonda. In what ways does your organization show its commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion?
So as you read in my bio, I'm the chair of the International Trade Administration's Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Council. It is a newly formed organization, so this is the inaugural group. And one of the primary responsibilities we have is creating a DEI strategic plan for the organization. So it's in my 9 years with the organization, this is, we've always had a commitment to an environment of respect and, workplace community. But now we have language around how we ensure that we continue to focus on that, and that, we're holding ourselves accountable to make sure that we are looking at issues that impact everyone in the workplace, and that we create an environment where everyone feels comfortable and we have authentic representation.
Very good, very good. Joshua, you have anything to add to what Rhonda was saying?
No, I think Rhonda really covered it nicely. It's something that, no matter where you are in the world, or in this case in the US, I'm in Kansas City, Rhonda's in Atlanta. We have colleagues, but this is something that's definitely, it's a subject of quite a bit of work in conversation and deliberation, and it will continue to be so. So thank you, though, for the question.
Thank you. Michael, how about your organization?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier, we have a team internally. It's a diversity, equity, and inclusion team that was formed over the last few years. And We, of course, work a lot in the business community, but so besides kind of the internal focus on some of the DEI working groups, we have to make sure that our hiring also reflects the diversity of this region. We also last year released the ATL Action for Racial Equity plan, and I will actually put that in the chat here real quick to take a look, because our organization has over the years been involved in a lot of similar efforts. And so this one is actually a multi-year, multi-step action plan designed to help address the ongoing effects of systemic racism here in the region. And so we have around 250 companies that signed onto that plan. And it really gives them the opportunity, gives them some kind of like a guide in different areas of the organization that they can follow. And as I mentioned, 250 companies signed onto that. They range in size and industry from across the Metro Atlanta. There's actually on the website a list of all the companies that signed onto it. And so that ATL Action for Racial Equity provides different guidelines and different books for organization to follow. They're focusing corporate policies, inclusive economic development, education, workforce development. And so I would encourage you to look through that as well. We, especially last year during the pandemic, we noticed that a lot of minority-owned businesses were heavily impacted by the pandemic, often much more than other organizations. And so last year we developed the Restore ATL initiative, which is focused on providing financial support to minority-owned businesses across Metro Atlanta. And then also from our public policy team, we have supported a lot of efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion over the last few years and essentially decades.
Thank you. Another issue that also is, of course, relevant, timely, is how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected your workplace and what you do on a daily basis? Maybe Joshua, you could start with that question.
Sure. Well, here we are. We're on a virtual event, right? So I think it's front and center, and I don't even know where to start with that question. It has such a profound effect on even just our workplace, our work environment. I will say that I've been impressed with the sort of ingenuity and persistence of U.S. exporters. A lot of the businesses that I work with, they've really adapted to virtual. A lot of the things that they've been doing, where they would travel to another country to meet a potential business partner and sell their products there, they've switched to completely virtual and are having virtual sort of networking, matchmaking meetings all the time. And some of that will remain even when there hopefully are no travel constraints. It's really can be a cost-effective, efficient way to succeed internationally. Now, of course, it's not going to always replace travel or trade missions or conferences, but we've seen that over and over again, that virtual tools for international business can have a lot of value, and we expect that to continue to happen. So it's had a huge impact. That, and I determined, this is completely a side note, I went back to my office for the first time in like a year and a half, a few weeks, a month ago, and I had a cactus that I hadn't watered that whole time, and it still was alive. So apparently, office plants are pretty resilient. I'd throw that in there. Thanks, Mourad.
You're welcome. Rhonda, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think Josh covered it. One of the things, not just the businesses that we work with, not being able to travel, but also, us as, foreign service officers, or, one of the things we did a lot was travel, and in this environment, we haven't been able to travel. So we've also, had to be creative in terms of how we do, virtual trade missions. So we are introducing companies to markets in new and unique ways. And so I think across the board, in many industries, the creativity and ingenuity has been quite impressive.
Michael.
Yeah, I can add to what Joshua and Rhonda said about the companies, how they use that opportunity. And I mean, for our work specifically, I've been working from home most of the time last year and also this year. We usually travel a fair amount. Of course, we couldn't do that. But I was also very impressed with the way that companies use that opportunity. I mentioned earlier that one of the programs we run is the Atlanta Metro Export Challenge, which we do with our partners here in the region, including state of Georgia and the US Commercial Service. And that was just impressive to see how companies spent the money. And of course, I know the data from the years before, like what did companies that received financial support spend the money on. It was primarily travel, it was trade shows and things like this. And then of course, last year, none of the companies could travel. And so it was interesting to see how they used the money. I mean, they spent as much as before, but on very interesting things like product registrations, virtual shows, translation material, marketing material, website translation, data compliance, all these things that companies really have to focus on. And we always make a strong point to not just focusing on the traveling part, but also getting really your business up and running for that international opportunity with all those kind of things. And so that was very impressive how the companies kind of pivoted, and then we're still able to achieve what they wanted to achieve with that financial support and mentorship, despite getting on a plane. So I thought that was exciting, and I hope that companies will use that and even going forward.
Very good, very good. And I was just to follow up on what something Rhonda said, necessity is the mother of all inventions. I mean, we really have become quite creative because of that necessity, as Michael alluded to also. Well, I think we are right at 2:30 here, 1 minute past. Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you, Joshua. And thank you, Michael, for sharing your time with us today. We learned about some wonderful opportunities at your organizations. We appreciate your valuable tips and advice for current and soon to be job seekers. We want to thank you for participating in the GSU Global Career Series. And we want to thank you, audience, also for attending this session. We hope you enjoyed it. Tomorrow's session will be with international federal programs at US Department of State, Peace Corps, and USAID. Same time, same place. If you haven't registered, please use the link in the chat. Finally, I'd like to thank the Atlanta Global Studies Center, the Center for Urban Language Teaching and Research, the Andrew Young School of Policy Studies, and the Global Studies Program for organizing the series. All Global Career Series videos can be found on the YouTube channel in this chat. Have a fantastic afternoon, everybody, and I hope to see many of you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.